that toughness though that we're talking about, because it's like even when you guys go to like the bubble and you're the 8th seed, right? And you end up making an NBA final. Like that's the type of toughness it builds though. Right? So talk about that bubble. I wasn't involved. You
They
guys
thought
were.
we was crazy.
Man,
They thought
listen.
I was crazy.
Star Donovan Mitchell has tested positive for the coronavirus.
That is why we should employ the NCAA. You know, all college, you know, all the conferences that are still having games and tournament games and all this stuff. That's why we should encourage everybody and implore everybody to put a pause.
When it comes to something that has went as long as the NBA, which has went longer than half a century, there are eras. And obviously, depending on what era you grew up in, whether it be 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, you might come to appreciate said era more because obviously you grew up with it. I grew up with the 2010s era, and it's my favorite. Partly because I grew up in this era, and partly because James Harden was on my Houston Rockets. And that was when my Houston Rockets were good. But that's a story for another day. Anyways, point of the story is everyone has a year or era that to them was special. And a year that I think about more often than I should is the NBA restart, or as it's more commonly known, the bubble. The bubble was such a weird yet fun era of basketball. One of those years I'm gonna talk about like old people talk about Will Chamberlain and his quote-unquote 100-point game. This is the bubble, and the bubble, just like any other NBA year, special. Now you might be thinking, what do you mean strictly hoops? I thought NBA games were that. And yes, NBA games are that in essence. But to better explain what I mean by this, I have to explain a lot. So let's take a traditional NBA game. It's like a really complicated egg omelet. There's your travels, there's stuff that the players have to do outside the court, but the most important of all is home court advantage. If you know ball, you know home court has a big impact on a team, unless your team is the Hawks, Wizards, or Pistons. Sometimes the opposing team's confidence can be whittled down by a Minnesota or a Lakers. Or it might be the opposite, and it might be some Houston Rockets. Yes, Tari Eason, I'm talking to you. And quite unfortunately, this plays a big factor into how a game will go. So if that's the egg omelet, think of the NBA bubble as your traditional. The best way to have an egg cooked, the sunny side up. An egg in its simplest form. A better example would have probably been like Chicago Jimmy Butler or Heat Jimmy Butler, but hopefully you get the point. In the bubble, you were just able to focus on playing basketball, and this results in confidence, which results in the next subject in this video. These unsung heroes were the guys that we didn't think were going to pop out like they did, but they somehow made a splash during this year. Rookie of the bubble, MPJ. Nurkic was hooping. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce his name. Trey Burke, Gary Trent Jr. was hooping. TJ Warren, people were calling TJ Warren MJ. And then the MVP of the bubble, Dame Lillard. And I'm going to be real, he did deserve a for real MVP, but it's the bubble, so yeah. But most of the names I mentioned, besides some, are just names that I didn't think about hoop-wise. TJ Warren was really leading the Indiana Pacers and got them in the playoffs. And it's weird because every time I forget about him, I always watch the bubble and see the carry job he did. There's a lot of players that also hoop, but obviously these were the ones that came to mind the most. And of course, there's the playoffs. The playoffs were competitive. These guys, except for maybe a few, legit had a chance to win the ring, especially the other LA team. But I guess nobody was going to take that ring seriously, huh, Lou? It's still the funniest cope to hear. A lot of the Western playoffs were back and forth, and the Eastern weren't that crazy except for the fact that Jimmy Butler went God mode, and the finals weren't so bad neither. But another thing I really liked was what happened after the bubble, where players gave their spill about how they felt. There's a bunch of funny stories that all stem from the bubble. The Rudy Gobert hate train starting, the LA Cappers, nobody was going to take that chip seriously, Jimmy Butler's $20 side hustle, TJ Warren becoming prime MJ, LeBron again becoming Le Cap when describing the living conditions in the bubble. The bubble was a special year both for basketball and for other reasons, but a better year, or yet a better era, is the 2000s. But that's a story for another video. Peace!